this on? Hello, is it on now? Oh,
Yeah.
what a concept. Hi, I'm Michael, and we have with us Emily and Sarah and Linda, and we are, Sarah was married to James, as you know, most of you know, and Emily is their daughter, and Linda is what's your actual title of at the
It's confusing for the moment.
yeah.
I'm gonna be the new director of the Flemish Autism Society.
Ah.
So
So she's our resident expert. I am a professional composer, and I am also autistic. So that was part of what interested me, was that there was a wonderful documentary made about James's workspace that these two ladies happen to be in, and you're going to see a little fragment of it in a moment. And I was curious because Sarah mentions in the documentary that James was diagnosed with Asperger's, which is now sort of antiquated term for what is now called autism level 1. And I was really interested. A lot of things about the documentary made me go, yeah, this really makes sense. And so fortunately, we go back a long way to when Emily was in the 5th grade. And so I called her up and asked her if she'd be willing to talk about this. And fabulously, Sarah agreed that she would be. So at any rate, we have a couple of clips to show you, an excerpt from the film, and also John Frizzell, who's a wonderful composer and also autistic and kind of an activist in this field, who wanted to be here, but he's neck deep in scoring a film, and he's got a little statement he wanted to make. So why don't we check that out, and then we can get to discussing.
sounds good.
I asked them for a better fade out, but that was the best they could do. Well, I think before we get underway with the main part of this, which is Sarah and Emily, I thought Linda might talk a little bit about what the definition of autism is in typical autistic traits, just because not everyone here is familiar with this, and there are some things that we will all assume that not everyone is going to understand. So you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, there are two ways to define autism. You have the classical way, it's the psychiatric view. It's the DSM-5 called, and they look at autism as a disorder. It's an autism spectrum disorder. And you have two, I'm just going to talk about this very shortly. You have two specific things people with autism do to define you have autism or not. And that is, you have a problem with social interactions and social communications, and you have repetitive behavior. This is not the way we as a society want to look at autism anymore. This is, an old school view of autism. We look at it as a natural diversity of humanity. Their brains are really wired in a different way than us neurotypicals. That means that people with autism, they view the world very differently, and they experience the world very differently. You can't turn off your autism. I think you can confide in that. So it's like they have, with this other wiring, they have a unique view on the world. So they have strengths and possibilities we can use as a society, and that's not often acknowledged that way. So people with this doesn't mean that there isn't a problem. So they face various problems. They really have a problem with reading emotions. Like my son, when I talk very loud, he always thinks I'm mad at him. That's not the case, definitely. So you have the social interaction, reading into emotions. They have a very strong focus, and also a very, when they discover their talent, they can have a very deep interest in something. And James's case, it was music, but it also can be design, or it can be programming, it can be everything. No two people with autism are the same. It still stays a spectrum. So you have people with autism that can't communicate at all, and you have people with autism that can't shut up. So yeah, that's the spectrum. So in this way, if you look at autism at this way, you can discover a lot of talents and unique perspectives society really can use. And that's a big difference than looking at it as a disorder.
There's a saying in the autistic community, which is, you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And I think that that's quite true. And so, well, let's hear about the one autistic person that we're all going to be hearing a lot of music from tonight, which is James. And so I really want to sort of make this as freewheeling as possible. I mean, just start saying stuff. Just start babbling. Yeah.
Go ahead. It's very true. The ability to have a strong focus in one area. That's very, very true. My younger sister, I believe, was also on the spectrum in the beginning of women being able to be diagnosed, and it wasn't a fair time for her, and I don't think it was a fair time for my dad as well. There's more research, there's more support, there's more information now that I think they both would have benefited from. I do know that in addition to being incredibly gifted with music, he was very gifted at collecting, gathering things, unique things, specifically translucent mechanical items. I mean, I didn't have to buy a new vacuum. It's been 9 years since he's passed, and I think I bought my first vacuum 2 years ago. There's just endless amounts of toys and trinkets. I mean, from the clip you can see in the studio, I feel like that studio is a representation of what was going on in his brain that he couldn't necessarily communicate. It's just a magical, I hope this isn't offensive, really weird place to exist. And it's a beautiful, weird place. I know that I feel very, very honored and grateful to not only have been his daughter, but also to have multiple people in my life that are on the spectrum at some point. I don't know how you feel about it. It's a very different dynamic.
I think, well, I talk about how James felt about it. The idea of autism or Asperger's came into my awareness with Oliver Sacks' book. That was a very popular book on various patients he had had, one of which was Temple Grandin, who became, I think, rather well known for having autism. And when I read that, I thought, oh my God, that is just like James. And I mentioned it to his mother. And then later he had a therapist he spoke with, and I think he was rather pleased, actually, to have the diagnosis. I think it gave his sort of amorphous differentness a name and a label, and I think he really liked it, honestly. But I agree with what you've said. I think it was both a gift and a struggle. In his case, he had the really good fortune of life offering him an opportunity to use his gifts, which were, he was very hardworking. He was very, very dedicated. He was relentless in getting work and doing work, and everything was super complicated, and it's just exhausting, the amount of effort that went into making music. But I think the actual creating of the music, which is what everybody wants to know, like, how did he do it? That, I think, was effortless. I really think, what for me would have been difficult was easy for him, and what was easy for him I couldn't imagine doing. So I feel as his, I guess, his widow, and I kind of think of myself as his mother, to be honest with you, that it was an amazing experience to have lived with him and known him. He was very, very difficult in real life. You have to realize in real life this was essentially impossible. You just had to do what he wanted. He just wouldn't go any other way. But those are my thoughts.
You know what you were saying about, feeling like his mother at times. I think my wife feels that way about me. And there are ways in which I think autistic people have, partly because of this kind of cluelessness about social norms. It's kind of, we have to do things logically that other people do intuitively. And so consequently, there are certain kinds of behaviors that, on the one hand, in some contexts may be perceived as charming and fun, and other contexts are just annoying and drive people nuts. And so you mind addressing that a little bit?
It's all you.
Yeah, really. Emily's like,
I'm just the kid.
I was a kid.
Yeah, I think that's true. I do think, James, as a little boy, I know he was nonverbal. He didn't speak until he was, I think, 4 or 5 years old. And I do know, I guess everybody is dead now, but I know he did his mother did send him to a special school. She told me it was a school for children. He wasn't, he was very bright, but he wasn't working up to his intellectual abilities. But that's not what the school was for. It was for children that were they couldn't figure out what to do with them. But I think James, he was incredibly bright. So he used his intelligence to decode everything. So he had like a coded way of interpreting what people wanted and didn't want, what was going on. So he could pass, as it were, if he wanted to. Now, this is a thing that my daughter was similar, and I brought this up with her. She had an educational plan with the school district, and I said, well, she can do anything if she wants to. And the therapist said, don't say that. Don't say that. But if there was motivation, I think his path would be lit. He could find his way if he had a desire and interest. But without the motivation, it was all occluded for him. It wasn't like intentional, deliberate selfishness. It was just the way little. I don't know. So I don't know. I've kind of lost my train of thought now.
So I have another question. So with his job, there came side effects. You have to go to social parties and all of that.
Yes.
How did he manage that one?
I'll give you a famous quote. You know what, Sarah? I'm famous enough now. I never have to go to dinner with the director again.
Yes!
No need to go out to dinner.
I have a story.
Oh, let's hear this.
I was in London with my dad a couple years ago, and I went to Abbey Road with him, and I met the director and all the people. And I think my mom has a lot of stories where she would do the schmoozing and the socializing for him, and like the wife of a musician normally does. And I took on that role when I was in London with him, and the director's like, oh, come to dinner and let's do this, let's do that. And I looked at him and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to steal my dad tonight. I just want to spend time with him. So I got him out of a dinner, and I think I did it twice in one trip. Or I'll do the, Dad, can we go to dinner tonight? And he would be like, oh, I have to leave work. I have to go to dinner with my daughter. So you're welcome.
Enablers. We're enablers.
We're not enablers. We're supporters of the creative people.
Precisely.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we loved him. He was enchanting. It is,
Don't you guys have 2 microphones there?
No, just
they
the
only
one.
have one. Here,
Yeah.
or we can share one. Just grab it when you need it.
I mean, he did there were a lot of difficulties, but there was also a whole lot of fun. There was a whole lot of
Let's
fun.
hear about fun.
Well, I think it was, Emily was adopted, and when we got her, we were. I feel sorry for her because up until that point, we just did whatever we wanted, and we lived out in the country, and we just. And our desires were obviously not to have loud parties and go drinking. They were obscure, esoteric desires for certain activities. And listening to music or gardening or I could read all day. I could paint all day. You could do whatever art you wanted to do as much as you wanted to do it. And I think it was a rude awakening for us when we had to be parents. I do think.
I'm so sorry.
I think everybody has the same shock when they realize that you can pick between having something to eat or taking a shower, and you never get to sleep. But I think for us in particular, we had lived a kind of otherworldly, magical life supported by his work, which he was oddly impractical about the whole money part of it. The rest of the world is looking at it, you get to be in Hollywood, and you get to do all this stuff, and you get to go to these places and eat out and do, I don't know, wear these designer clothes, whatever that stuff is that the rest of the world thinks. I think for us that did not register. We just lived in our own world, like not quite as cluttered as that, but we had a lot of dogs, I'll say that.
Well, it wasn't, we didn't do the red carpet lifestyle. We didn't do the Hollywood lifestyle, but we definitely did the eccentric Hollywood lifestyle. It wasn't, the fancy cars, fancy schools, designer clothing, but I got to grow up riding horses. I got to play in the dirt and climb trees, and I didn't have to worry about, looking appropriate or doing, I don't know, I spent the first 7 years of my life in the mud. It was magical. Like his studio, I didn't realize that wasn't normal. I didn't realize that every dad didn't have a studio. I didn't realize that every family didn't have a giant painting studio like my mom had, it was different. It was very different, but it was something I'm still grateful for. Obviously crazy hair, tattoos, like I've carried on the artistic weirdo way. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't think there's anything to feel bad for. It's definitely difficult being the child of someone with autism and someone who is so specialized. He would work nonstop. So there's, you could either come to the horse show or come to the school program, or he would work. And I don't think he was capable of not working. I think he would have died if he couldn't have been in his studio writing music. But I've learned a lot from having that type of person as a dad. I've learned that there are different ways of communicating. And you know how my mom was saying that writing music was so effortless for him, but going to a family dinner was really tough, if not an option. And I remember sitting and watching my dad. I don't remember what film. I think it must have been around Titanic, or I didn't really pay attention. Like, to me, he was my dad. He wasn't, James Horner, the composer. To me, he was just the weirdo that was really fun. But I remember seeing him sit at his piano. He played a couple notes, and then all of a sudden there's sheets of music, just sheets and sheets of music for a full orchestra. And I don't know how that happened. I'm like, how do you do that? I'm convinced that my dad was an alien. He had to be. All musicians have to be. But how can you sit there and play a couple notes and hear this entire orchestra in your head? I don't get it. I wish I could do that. But I did learn that, there's a lot to people's behavior. Like he could be incredibly emotional with his music, but not interpersonally. But if you see like all the blinking things in the studio, he would, if I moved, he would make sure I had a lava lamp. He would make sure that I had the vacuum cleaner or something. And I feel like that was one way. And translucent. There were a few. That was the thing. They were the translucent, weird, see all the gears and whatnot. But he would make sure that, I had a lava lamp in my house. So like he couldn't actually come and visit me because that would mean he would leave his bubble. But there was a piece of him in my home so I wouldn't forget him. And it was a beautiful gift growing up with my dad and my sister, both of them being on the spectrum, because I've learned so much about translating physical behavior to get what I need out of a relationship. I learned a lot about my dad and his little quirks and, make sure you get the best internet or you have the car that's the safest or something ridiculous was the way that he was able to be involved in my daily life instead of coming to, a school program. And it was the same with my sister. I was married and I remember showing her my ring and she was like, well, why did you get diamonds? They're not even precious. You should have gotten opals. And for me, I was like, you couldn't just say congratulations. But for me, that was my sister acknowledging something in my life instead of completely ignoring it. And that was how she was able to participate. It was the same thing with my ex-husband when he asked my dad if it was okay. Instead of having a whole conversation with him, he calls my mom and he was like, Sarah, can you just get it? Make sure he gets the right thing. Can you just do it? Make sure he gets the best one. Again, a way that my weirdo dad was involved in my daily life without actually showing up.
And that's a real big misconception. If you get your diagnosis from autism, they say you don't have empathy.
No,
You
that's
show it
not
just in a
it.
very different way.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to hear. You don't have empathy. It's just the way you communicate it. That's completely different. Like your sister with your wedding ring. My kids would do the same. So.
Yeah, I think it can be very frustrating to be on the receiving end of that.
Yeah.
And then you get angry. And then when you realize they are nice, you're mean back. Like it's a kind of...
I was really angry on my son's psychiatrist when she said that he can't imagine what you are feeling. What the fuck?
Yeah. I don't know about the medicalization. I don't know what that's all about, because I guess I would say I think everyone is neurologically very different, and it's like everyone's a different kind of flower, and to say that this flower is the only flower and these other flowers aren't flowers is it's sort of a dominating a narrative for the people that have that particular, the daisies get to say only daisies can be flowers. So I think today there's much more need for people with intellectual abilities or, with the development of the internet and AI. I mean, there's less concrete need for people. They don't shovel coal, they write programs. They developed imagery for software. They're not doing so much manual labor. So I think that the work environment and what's required of people is also really different. And I mean, I happened to listen to an interview of two programmers the other day, and there's not a word of their conversation I could understand. And they're laughing hysterically with their jokes to each other. But think how many people are programmers now. That's one of the biggest jobs there is to be a programmer. So I don't know about this whole medical thing, why it's got a diagnosis. It seems odd.
Me neither.
Yeah.
I'm not a scientist either.
Well, I think that that you're talking about the pathologism of what is essentially a diversification. And my personal theory, and I have a difficult time not going down rabbit holes on my personal theories, but so I apologize in advance. But my personal theory is that the neurodivergences like autism, ADHD, and a number of others exist because they were useful to the human tribe as a whole. Now, if everybody was autistic, that could be complicated. But that to have a certain percentage who are is very useful to the population as a whole. And there has been this drive, I think with the best of intentions, to try to say, well, why are these people different? Oh, there must be something wrong with them. And there are certainly people who are disabled who are autistic, and you know, and I don't want to dismiss that part of the community, but there, in many ways, it is more of a different ability. It would be like if somebody showed up and they only spoke Swahili, and you said, "Oh, they have no empathy because they don't speak English." Or they don't speak Dutch, or they don't speak Flemish, or whatever. And, you know, the reality is somebody who is as bilingual as Linda is here is actually sort of unusual in the world. Quite common in this city, but in America, most of us are monolingual, and there is a belief that people who speak other languages, there is almost this prejudice. Oh, well, they don't understand us. And so I feel like that to draw analogy here, that's kind of what happens a lot with autism.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we are talking here a little bit of like a subsect of the, I'd say, very highly intelligent and then having a good fortune. A lot of life is simply luck of where you're born and the time you're born and the opportunities you get. And
Pardon me, we're getting hand signals here. What are you trying to tell us?
39.
30 minutes, you're saying? Oh, well, that's fine.
we're done.
Or 13?
Pardon? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand.
This is so fitting for this topic. This is absolutely perfect. Speaking of communication.
Thank you. Yeah, we were she was really trying to help out, and of course I was completely clueless. And but what she was saying is we do want to do a Q&A, and so the question is there more that we want to discuss here before we go to the Q&A, or should we start, you know, Emily, you're quite articulate about this stuff.
I just personally, I don't like talking about autism as a disability, or handicap is a word that's still used. I wouldn't want to have issues with social interaction. Clearly, I'm the chatty Cathy. Clearly, I'm the talker. I'm the theatrical one, which I think I learned from my dad a little bit. But I do wish that I could see things the way people with autism can. I wish I could have that gift, that specific gift that would be, that's a benefit, not necessarily a disadvantage. Some people can get really stuck on something and it actually doesn't help further their lives. But I do think people with autism have such a beautiful brain. It's different, but I think we're very lucky if you know someone who is on the spectrum and you learn, like for me and my dad, if I learned how to communicate and how to connect and how to experience him in a positive way and not just a resentful way, I think it's one of the greatest gifts that I've had with my dad and my sister. There's a lot, I wouldn't be the person I am today if I didn't learn how to exist with my dad, is pretty much what that is.
Yeah,
and he was weird. It was cool.
There's something about people with autism that I envy, and we talked about it when we met each other. They have the best bullshit radar in the whole world. They scan you in 1 minute and they know if you're good or if you're wrong. So, and this is something I'm really jealous about. I don't have that.
My favorite part
You
is
can
where
fool
there's
me.
no filter. So if they think you're bullshit, they say it, and there is no problem with it. And I wish I could get away with that. Oh.
Well, do we? Are there questions? Are there anybody would like to ask? Oh, I see a hand up.
It is a little hard for us to see.
Yeah, it is. So I think they're bringing you a microphone.
Up in the back.
Hi.
Hi.
As a composer, you have to work with other musicians to get your music alive. He was conducting, was making music with other people. And as a composer, you have to talk about the emotions in the music. So how did this work out with James Horner?
I don't think it would be discussing emotions. I think what James would be after would be a particular sound, a particular phrasing, a particular dynamic, and he would describe what he wanted the person to achieve in terms of the quality of sound they were making. I think he would have, this is just my perspective, but I would assume that he assumed all the musicians spoke musician language, and they understood that it was about that a specific quality would provide the evocation of effect or feeling that the composer was after, and they would do their best to give him the sound he wanted. He was incredibly specific about what he wanted people to do, and I don't know if this is Michael's a composer as well, so I don't know how everyone does it, but for him there would be he would assemble a cue in a certain way, and he would build the rehearsal time and parts in a certain way, and he'd play it in a certain way, and he'd have very specific players. He always used the same guys that he could get, and he'd bring in other colors and sounds that he wanted. Like every singer is a different voice. He would want this voice, and he'd want this note done this way. But he was very, very clear. Like, let's say he had I'll just randomly pick an instrument. He had a harmonica player. He would let them have some time trying it out, and he'd say, he
Sorry.
Oh, very good. He would never, he had great respect for an individual artist's creation of what they were making. Like, this is not a studio classical player, which he was a little more brutal with, I have to be honest. But an individual color that he would bring in, he would understand that as someone that wasn't a classical player had their own way of coming to their art form, and he was very patient in that way. But I don't think there was emotional direction, as far as I remember.
No emotional conversation. But I've heard stories of how relentless he was. I had the opportunity to sing in a choir on a film of his, and he would come out every couple of minutes, like 1 or 2, right? 1 to 2 minutes. And he would say, this specific person's not singing this way, or it was this violin isn't doing this. And they would do it over and over and over again. So I don't think there was a lot of emotional communication as much as it was play until your fingers bleed and it sounds the way I hear it. That was my dad.
Are there any other questions? We've got some other folks here.
Hello. I just want to say that I really connect with James Horner. I'm a young composer, film composer, and composer for games. And I also have Asperger. I was diagnosed with it when I was very young, and I have like the feeling I live in this fantasy world. Like, yeah, the normal things are like very hard for me. Like, I can't drive the car and stuff. Like, I'm still learning so many things, but I'm always working, always composing. I'm a bit locked up. So yeah, I really connect with James Horner in that way.
I got my driver's license at age 28. I just thought you would like to know that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm like, I wouldn't worry about it. So
I believe the microphone is making its way toward you two folks.
Hi, thank you for coming here. I'm a bit hesitant to ask this question because I feel it's a bit personal, so feel free not to respond to it.
Right.
But in this wonderful place called the internet, there are a lot of stuff that's been written and said and on videos and texts and articles and so forth. So was James, did he know about this? Did he care about the opinion of others? Saying, for example, making fun of like the danger motif. And would that bother him? Did he perceive it in a different way? Maybe, I'm really curious to feel how he would react to this.
I think no.
I don't think he cared. I don't think he even looked it up, honestly. Or he might have had fun with it too. He liked to play games a little bit. I feel like life was a game of chess, and he'd kind of move things around to see what pot he could stir. I don't think he cared.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very painful to have a score thrown out, and oftentimes, I think that was like a wholesale rejection versus an individual critic somewhere saying negative things. But I think he just had to suffer through that. The occasion I knew where he did this little Romeo and Juliet picture where the score was thrown out by, I think one of the producers wanted somebody he knew to do the score, and from what I heard, it wasn't nearly as good. I can understand people's criticism of very specific details in the work, or the borrowing or the repetition of motifs or this, but that wasn't the point of the film music. His work had a very functional aspect, which is when you watched the movie with the music, it played better. It made a better movie. So a lot of the things that he might get criticized for, I don't think were of interest to him particularly.
Personal opinion was not important. It was the opinion of his work mattered. Opinion of his character, he couldn't care less.
Yeah.
We have a gentleman down front, I think.
Hello. My question is also a little bit personal, and if you feel free to not answer it, it's okay for me. Am I correct that you mentioned a somewhat esoteric lifestyle, not so Hollywood, but a little bit? Okay. So my question really is, was James a spiritual man, and how did he have his own sort of?
Good question.
Because to me, the toys and the way of composing, it's almost like a divine.
Yeah.
You know.
This is what we discussed in the car on the way here.
He had these giant wind chimes that were all the way. They had to use machines to hang them, and so the giant wind chimes, the copious amounts of dogs. from like little chihuahuas to a Great Dane. There were always dogs. There's always blinking toys. There's a lot of different energy. So I don't think he ever specified whether he was spiritual or religious or anything, but I think he had a very different connection with energy in the world, which, I mean, music in itself is almost a religion and a spiritual thing. So I do think he was. I don't think it was as organized as any definition, though.
You know, oddly, Michael and I in the car driving here, we were just discussing music and classical music. And I always enjoy, I'm not a musician, but I enjoy talking to musicians and sharing my experience of listening to music. And this exact same topic came up, and I said, it's like he is kind of in another realm and visits Earth, and in the normal plane of things, the rest of the world's looking at this saying, what's he doing and why is it like this? And he just didn't care. He just didn't live in the regular people world, is how I would say. But maybe you want to.
But you also mentioned Sarah's a painter. Now, she's not she doesn't go out and sell her paintings, but you talked about how, well, why do this? And it was because, and we both postulated that it's your soul connecting with the divine.
Yeah, I think you just find meaning in a different realm. And I feel like this listening to classical music, and I probably got this I feel like maybe knowing James and his window onto his music listening experience, which was very specific and done. There are certain pieces and ensembles, and then you get to know other musicians, and they will say, well, I really like this conductor's version of, I don't know, Mahler's Ninth with this orchestra this year, and you listen to this, and it is so moving. And then it's like someone will introduce you a different version of that. And you listen to music as kind of a transporting experience, but also, I would say, a feeding experience. It's like soul food. And also the older I get, the more this is kind of how you want to spend your time. And yeah, okay.
True. Hey, Robert.
Hello, Michael. I worked with James. Had the
I'm so
great
sorry.
opportunity of working on a number of his soundtrack album releases at Perez Saraband. And I also conducted the symposium with him when he attended Hollywood in Vienna. My perception, kind of within the industry context, was that what kind of became, the later years of his, that he kind of mellowed towards the end. Was there any aspect of that? Does that ring true in any way? Was that conveyed in a personal context? Because he my perception was that he was becoming a little more soft around the edges, not to overstate it, but there was something.
Professionally speaking, or interpersonally?
Well, the way he would just interact within the industry, and in the context even of Hollywood in Vienna, I think even that whole experience ended up meaning a lot more to him personally than he was even prepared for.
I don't know if people are aware, but James's father was born in Czechoslovakia but grew up in Vienna, and that's at the center of Western classical music. And James played piano with his father when he was very young. That's what they did together. And James's father happened to be in the United States when things began to get difficult in Western Europe, and stayed in the United States and was able to get his parents and sister out of the country, but the rest of the family ended up in the camps, and most of them died. I think there was one other family that came out later. So his father, that was never discussed. I became part of the family when I was in my early 20s. This was never discussed, and there would be a background story of it. But like many, I grew up in the West Los Angeles. I had many friends whose parents were refugees, but that part of his father's life hovered always there with a kind of pathos, I would say. And I think going to Vienna in particular was incredibly moving for him. And it kind of brought everything full circle. It just, and I can see what you might be saying about his later years. He was much less prickly and arrogant. I mean, he was an arrogant little boy. When, I used to push those people, the production people. Snobbery, I guess, is maybe the way you'd say it. But he would just make the studio give him things like, I need this hotel room and this plane.
Like
this,
a
let's see what they can get out of these people. He was difficult. And I think he just, I think he was arrogant. Yeah, definitely. So he did mellow. I know, I read somewhere he was saying some nice things about other composers later on, which I found amusing.
Or he did not get
like,
nicer, or he just learned how to play the game a little better.
I think he was
really
tired.
Depends on how you want to look at it.
I think he was also tired. And he was tired of Hollywood. He was just tired of getting beaten up constantly by everybody. And you can just imagine you're going to write. I mean, think like by the time he's 30, he's written more scores and worked on more films in post-production than anybody else he's working with at that point. So everyone he's working with they've only done a couple, 3 movies, one. And so they would all have opinions. And anybody that wanted to get involved in the music that didn't match his sensibilities. It was just like this enormous burden that he was stuck with some guy trying to tell him what to do. So I think it was, and he'd done so many movies. I think he was getting tired at the end of the whole thing, honestly.
I think there was another question over here.
Thanks for all your sharings, very instructive. You talked a lot about social abilities, about emotion, which are present, of course, in these patterns. But what about this sense of humor? Did you have? Of course, I guess you have one. Was it caustic? Was it brutal? Was it soft?
So dark, so dark.
I'm not really surprised.
He always spoke very softly and had the little accent, and you'd think he was all gentle, but his sense of humor was dark. I like to think I was trained in the art of dark sarcasm. I do what I can. Just carrying on the legacy. It was dark, and he would make a lot of people extremely uncomfortable and have that evil little smirk about him because he knew that he was making people uncomfortable. I think it was fantastic, but yes, it was very dark. Thoughts?
I feel like I can't.
I mean, don't tell any secrets. Off the record, though.
Well, we only have a few minutes left. Are there any other questions? We have about 5 minutes. So we have whoever you like. You have a better idea of who is next.
How was his flying related to his autism?
So good. Such a good pilot.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so
That's
dark humor.
Related to his,
There it is.
How was this related to his autism or his music?
I think it was both, personally. I got to go to the hangar where all of his planes were, and It's this huge space with lots of light that was very quiet except for the planes. His studio jammed tons of stuff in it, a lot, but had that same, it's almost like the same quiet from all the electric toys and the buzzing. It felt like the same quiet at the hangar. And I think flying, I know at least for me with riding horses with us, there's this adrenaline and this rush that you get from being on the animal. I feel like the flying was, again, a rush. It's very technical with all the manuals and the buttons and the maintenance. I think it was directly related to his autism. I think that's, I mean, again, we have obsessions, right? One of his is music or his focus. Planes is another one. Again,
they weren't normal planes.
No.
They were stunt planes. He died in a stunt plane. And then he had this really fast little black helicopter that he would...
His name was Lucy.
Buzz around and this other little tiny plane that was really fast. These weren't normal, weekend flying things.
I believe they were actual fighter jets. I think there was
that
an
last
Italian
one
jet, an American vintage.
They go really fast.
Two-seaters.
Stunt flying and
eject button.
Yeah. It was. I think insane might be an apt description.
Eccentric. It was eccentric, not insane.
Yeah, he tried to get me to go up, and I was like, no, we can't both be in one of those.
He wouldn't take me flying. I asked him a couple times. It was his thing.
Says it all.
Obviously.
I'm not going to risk my daughter. My wife, maybe, but
Yeah, it was, and he would fly obsessively and repeatedly. I remember one of the guys at the hangar. I don't know. The flying thing is just weird already. The guys are like, oh, he died doing what he loved. And you're like, well, if you don't do it, then you won't die. So maybe, And then, it'd be like, oh, yeah, the hangar next, oh, yeah, that guy died last year. He was, blah, blah, blah. And then it'd be like this, they all die. Like they all take their things out and eventually, it's a very high risk. It's, they don't stay up by themselves kind of thing. So, and it's not normal. I mean, a normal Hollywood guy would have a G5 that he'd fly to Jazz Fest or something.
With a co-pilot.
With a co-pilot.
And all the
This isn't like, oh, we can't have a we just can't wait to get the co-pilot out of the plane. Because then I can be alone.
Well, I think we have to wrap it up. We've got 2 minutes left. I don't really. I know there are a number of other questions, but I hate to be rude, but because they're all really fun. But do you guys have any final thoughts, or you, Linda?
You wrap it up, Linda. You're the
professional. You're the pro. Yeah, let's get.
I'm not a pro yet, but in the movie, the first sentence you say is, "He had such a good imagination," and that's something also misconception. And his work shows people with autism do have imagination. And if I can end with something, it's please don't have misconceptions about autism anymore.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. And I hope you all come to the concert tonight.